So let's
Yeah.
get back to it. That was a little sidetrack. Woo!
That's funny.
Ed?
Okay, yeah, so let's see. So I think I'll let you count down and then we can like pop it off.
Okay. Oh yeah, I can feel we're gonna pop it off tonight. Okay. There we go. Okay. Let me put my glasses on because I talked about it with my glasses.
Well,
Okay.
no monocles. We
No,
still
they're
okay
coming.
that
They're coming.
Oh really?
Yeah, we're gonna sell them at our merch store too.
Because we must invest. I feel like then that's when we'll be like at level 2.0.
We both put them out at the same time.
Yes, exactly. We 100 need this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's coming. Don't worry. I've done some research. Okay. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, I'm Dr. Laura.
And I'm Matthew.
And this is We Changed Our Minds podcast.
And I think it's helpful before we get started, just as a friendly reminder, that the materials and contents of this podcast are presented for educational and informational purposes only. So the materials and contents are not medical, psychological, legal, or other professional advice, and they're not intended to be substituted for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So if you have any specific questions about your health or healthcare decisions, please seek the advice of a licensed healthcare professional.
Yeah, it all sort of grew out of Playing for Free at the Panhandle.
Playing for free.
Yeah, that was like that was like the basis really of everything we did. I mean, it wasn't so much playing gigs because there weren't that many gigs at the time.
Yeah.
So when we lived in San Francisco, we moved into San Francisco in '66. It was just the thing to do was to go down and play in the Panhandle on a truck, run a cord.
Find some power.
Find some power. Right? We actually ran the cord across Oak Street, plugged in something. I can't imagine what their electric bill must be. But I mean, that was the thing. There was somebody there living there who would volunteer their electricity, and we couldn't afford generators, and it all just sort of grew out of that.
Roll podcast. Hey, Laura.
Hey, Matthew. I am so excited about this week's episode.
Dude, we are back again after that first episode release, which has gone so well. How cool has that been?
Oh, man, it's so exciting. But all it makes me feel like is there's just so much more to think about and so much more to discuss.
I mean, we haven't even scratched the outer surface of all of the great shit there is to talk about.
Well,
I mean, not necessarily because our lives are so interesting. I think they're fairly interesting, but we just we've had so many special guests already, and we've recorded so much dialogue between you and me. It could just go so many places. We're really pumped, and the feedback's been really good. I think we had within 24 hours of the first episode going live, I had like 30 views, which to me, I don't know, that sounded like a lot at first. I haven't peeked at it recently. It's only been a couple days.
Yeah, well, I think people are hungry for this kind of information. And I think we really are excited because we picked this week's topic, and I got so jazzed up because I mean, it's mythical to me, right?
It is.
Growing up, I moved around a lot, but I kind of lived on the East Coast and in the
Me too.
South and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And California was this, legendary place,
Mm.
right? It
Oh
was
yeah.
beaches and palm trees and surfing.
Movie stars and
Yeah.
rock bands,
Just
right?
everywhere exciting that I wasn't. And
Pretty
I just
much.
could
That's how
not
I felt too.
wait to go out west. It was like some kind of, like on the road kind of
Beacon call, huh?
mythology, right? Like just get in the
calling you to
car
it like
and
a
head
lighthouse.
that way, right?
Yes, same.
And one of the places that really stood out as a legend was like Haight Ashbury.
Oh yeah, the one and only epicenter of the original psychedelic wave that just transformed everything. Came out of that little neighborhood, and just like you, Laura, I think we discovered that recently that we both moved. I mean, I think from the time I was born till 14, we moved every year, and it was a different state, but it was none of the cool ones. It was always like fucking. Oh, we lived in like I can't even list them anymore because we have so many, but it was like Texas and Pittsburgh and fucking Nebraska and like these places. But I remember when it became time for junior high school, we were going to move one final time and then settle in for a while. And my dad had a choice. He had a job offer in Southern California or Birmingham, Alabama. And he was like split between the two. And we ended up going to Alabama. And I've just thought so many times how different my life would have turned out if we ended up in California back then. But alas, I had to wait until I finished high school. And then I was in California, I think a month later after I finally finished high school in Alabama, and then have never left.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time that you came to California?
I do. And the Haight Ashbury is right there. Yeah, I guess we can jump into it. So this week, yeah, we're gonna focus on the Haight Ashbury, and our special guest is a good friend of mine who is just a San Francisco legend. I mean, the cat is like he's a living, breathing, tripping, just organic mass of Haight Ashbury history. He's been there since, I think he said he moved there in 60, or he was really there pre-Summer of Love and still is there to this day. And I met that cat, well, when he had a store down on Lower Haight, and we struck up a friendship in the store. He eventually grew to trust me enough that he ended up inviting me over to his house where we played music. We started playing music, and we still do to this day. And he actually plays keyboards in a little band I made there out of his house, out of his living room, which come to find out that it's a tradition that started, that free jamming in his living room is a tradition that started after the evening of the first human being be in, and still continues to this day. So it's been such a trip knowing that cat, and we got him to talk to us for like an hour. But we wanted to first talk about our experiences with Haight Ashbury because they are many at this point. And yeah, Laura, I mean, I knew I wanted to come out west, and I was like I said, I graduated high school. I did that summer Dead tour, so I like high school graduation. I think 2 days later, I was at the Highgate show in Vermont, and then did pretty much that whole tour until Pittsburgh. I jumped off at Pittsburgh because I was just a little. I just didn't know how to tour well back then. I was pretty young and didn't have much money or any money, and just like I was like backpacking it. No, really, I remember I had a van, I had a bus like in high school, and I sold it before I went on that summer tour because I just wanted to be free from the van or whatever. So I would catch rides as I went. A lot of times it would literally be like, I mean, like RFK comes to mind, where I was walking out of the show, good and high, and trying to figure out how I was going to get to, what was it after RFK that year? I think maybe Pittsburgh was after RFK that year. And didn't have a ride and only had a little backpack. And I remember knocking on school bus windows in the parking lot. I'd be like, "Hey guys, you got room for one more?" And that went on until like 3 a.m. I was like literally like almost one of the only people in the parking lot left.
Yeah, I mean, and to be the last person in a deadlocked parking lot really says a lot there, man.
You're really bottom of the barrel at that point, dude.
Like, wow.
I mean, ooh, yeah. It's like everyone left. There's like garbage and like cadavers, you know.
Yeah, like, the big machines like pushing things.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're sweeping the lot.
Lights. Yeah, totally.
I think I actually even tried to curl up because I was so tired and tried to just get some sleep in my sleep bag and woke up by police kicking me. And then thank God I found this one school bus was like, yeah, all right, fine, get in here. You know, they weren't happy about it. And it was like it was like all kids like me, basically. They had nowhere to go or nowhere to ride with. And this guy was like, okay, get in the school bus. And it was so brutal. We spent the whole night. It was like the most ragtag bunch of people, and someone had scored like someone's credit card in the parking lot, like ground scored a credit card, and so these kids went. We didn't sleep a wink, dude. It was like all night, fucking bumping along in this grimy ass school bus, going from gas station to gas station, buying like as much like cigarettes, beer, and like water to sell on the lot as they could, like at each stop, and they just did that all night long. It was just brutal.
I just love whoever got that credit card receipt.
Oh
they were
God!
Like, they were wow, they were thirsty. They just were living off of beer, water.
Oh, look
and
at
cigarettes.
this! Yeah, 10 cartons of cigarettes at the Quickie Mart. Yeah, but anyway, so by the time I was at Pittsburgh, I was pretty much over it. So I left and I went backpacking in Vermont, and then headed out west on my own. And I went straight to San Francisco, and I didn't know a single soul there, but I knew San Francisco was San Francisco, you know, and I felt like I would figure it out. And I got there, and I remember there was Jerry had already died, and there was Freshly, and there was a Grateful Dead dance party at the Fillmore that night where they were just playing a show, and everyone was dancing. And I showed up, and, you know, I didn't really meet anybody. I was kind of bug-eyed and just overwhelmed by the city. That's the thing, is I wasn't really a city kid. And so that's what hit me when I got to SF. It was a beautiful, but it was a city, you know, and I didn't even know where to sleep that night. And I remember one of the guys, this one cat I met, he told me two things that really helped me. He said, go to the beach and you can sleep in the dunes, and then go north. It's kind there. I'll never forget. He said, "Go north. It's kind there," and he meant Arcata.
Yeah.
And this is actually where I still live, because it was kind there. It was kind there, but I only lasted 2 days, Laura. I got there. I slept in the dunes that night. I woke up to a cop coming over the dunes, and waking me up in my sleeping bag, and he searched me. I had spent the last of my money on a Haight. I bought a sack of weed, of short little frosty green Cali kind buds that wasn't quite even an eighth for $50. And he took it. He took my eighth. He stuck his stuff in under his belt, and searched me for needles and other drugs, and then let me go. But it just shook me up, and I was just kind of over it and tired. And so I drove north. So that was my brief first introduction. I would love to hear yours. However, now the Haight Ashbury is like, that's pretty much where I spend all my time when I'm in San Francisco. I've been there since hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and it's where I stay and I play music, and so I know it well now. But this was, of course, like 30 years ago or something when I first went there. So how about you, Laura?
Well,
I think your history is much richer than mine, you know.
No, well, I think one of the things that stands out from what you're saying is San Francisco, if you're broke, and San Francisco, if you're not broke, is maybe the defining difference in all of that, right? Yeah.
Maybe.
So
although if you're a young entrepreneur,
oh,
and you have some hustle in you, and a little bit of creativity and a little bit of fearlessness, you can flip a fucking buck there. We can get back to that, because I did return and had some little escapades in the park as a young entrepreneur that actually all worked out really well. But please, take a turn.
Well, you know, that is pretty much the story, right?
Yeah.
It's like you roll up on the Haight, and I think Jerry was still alive when I went there, but you know, you have this mythology, like we were talking about, like, oh, it's this magic place, and you think you're going to show up and it's going to be like flower power or something, and everyone's just going to be shining and new and barefoot and all of these kind of things that I don't know what I saw in Life magazine. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But like
we'll pause though, because for people who don't know, the Haight Ashbury, it's literally just a juncture of two roads. It's a neighborhood. Haight Street runs long, and then Ashbury runs across it, and it's right at the tip of the panhandle of Golden Gate Park. It's literally just a little neighborhood. So just for all you folks who've heard about it, that's what it is.
Right. It seems like a little neighborhood, but it has like such a big, rich history. It almost seems like its own place inside the city, like its own, like, kingdom, right?
It is a magical mystery vortex.
Yes, exactly. And when I got there, it was like the early 90s. I don't know, like 93, something like that. And it wasn't so shiny. It actually had like a little bit of grime to it, and just like the city does,
What were the circumstances that brought you there?
Well, let's see. So we were like in between some shows, and we rode into the city to like try to score, I think, some L or something like that, because we knew some people, and then we had a friend that was like working and doing this like rave stuff at this club, and he was busy, and so we just like pulled up onto the Haight and parked our ride, and we had like this van, like a VW van that all of us were like staying in.
You could sleep in it. Yeah,
and you could just like sleep in it and hang out and stuff. And like you said, it was all about the street kid hustle, like Haight Street posse, and there were some real charming characters, right?
Did you find out that you started meeting people right away?
Well, luckily from shows and tour, we already had this kind of like network of people that we knew and recognized.
Because people kind of orbit the Haight, right? I mean, even if they weren't from there, like in between tour.
Right, exactly. And especially the Wrecking Crew.
Oh, shit.
They had their own, I
never tangled with those kids.
Yeah, well, they're the best, right? So, like Fast Eddie and Ira and all of these cast of characters. And for people who don't know what I'm talking about, they were kind of older than us by a few years. And Fast Eddie was this just legendary character. Like, I think he literally had like 15 million patches on his outfit and tie-dye, and he was definitely hilarious and stuff. And they were just definitely the outlaws of the scene, and they definitely held a space there. And there was like Patches and Kells Bells and just these just hilarious and funny and a little bit wild card adventure type of characters that were happening. And yeah, the only way you could really kind of get around was hustling a little bit. So like Matthew was saying, there's these things called Haights, which was basically like an eighth of weed, but maybe just a little bit shorter.
Right? Only a little.
Like pinch a little bit for yourself, and then
this is how I remember Haights. There would be an actual eighth, which was 3.5. The kids would take it, break it in half, takes the head nug out of each half, and then sell each one as eighths for 50.
Yeah, and there was also basically the whole point was just to find good custies, and that was just like lingo for like customer, right?
Yeah, right. It's kind of semi-derogatory.
Yeah, right.
For tourists who will buy a sack of weed, overpriced sack of weed.
So you just go around like buds, doses, all this kind of stuff, and just try to hustle up a little bit of money. I didn't spend too much time like actually needing to do this.
In the block,
right? Because I also was back on tour. We had friends. We were traveling all over. But there were some definite characters that were holed up, and that literally was their life. We also would get hotels, and just one of the fun things was always just having names for stuff. So there was this restaurant called Phuket Thai, but it was spelled PH, and we used to call it Fuck It Thai. And then and there's instead of the Easy 8, it was like the Sleazy 8, or
Mm.
instead of Motel 6, we'd be like, let's go to the Motel 6 Up, which was kind of like a cop kind of thing to say,
Okay.
but there was definitely those you know, tribal elders, right? So you have
They were
maybe,
around.
yeah, and I think they added a little bit of grounding and a little bit of ideas about how not to go too far over the edge,
Kept
right?
kind of kept. There's I don't know. There was a really something that struck me is there was kind of this self-policing ethic on the amongst the street kids, I have to say. And it was surprising because it was pretty much self-policed. Where I didn't have any experience with getting ripped off. People that could front people things that would they would come. These were street kids. They would come back and pay me or have it back. I never had any issues, and I was pretty impressed by that because this was I think just like in the '60s, it was just a melange of whoever showed up, and a lot of I think probably troubled kids who've been homeless and on the run, or it just gets a hell of a nexus point for travelers. But yet there seems to be an ethic that is dominant there that I don't assume is there in other cities, and that's a carryover. I feel like of the ethos of the '60s.
Yeah, I think, one of the ethos of this 60s too is it's a time where there was a lot of, fun things like weed and LSD. And I think when I arrived in the 90s, I expected that same kind of thing. But one of the things that had really taken over the environment in a big way is crack a little bit, but mostly
Oh,
heroin, right?
really?
So lots of
Okay.
and big time needles would be laying on the street and stuff.
Mm,
I remember when I had my kid and Ethan, and he was maybe one or something, and we went to this Summer of Love 1996 that was
hmm
in the park,
hmm
and it was just such an incredible event. And I think
I was like
Jello,
the 50 year
the 50
from the
year, and
BN.
yeah, and Jello Biafra, and it was the first time I had been back to the Haight as a parent rather than just
Oh,
as somebody kind of running around causing mayhem. And I remember I literally could not take Ethan out of the little baby backpack that I had because I was just holy cow. There's
oh, so many
you're
needles.
yeah, and just so much
Wow.
stuff around,
Oh,
right? That
wow.
I just was wow, this isn't a family rich environment.
Okay, okay. Well, that's an angle I guess I was fortunate I didn't. I was probably too naive to notice.
Yeah, I think when you are protecting someone else, your eye you
Yeah,
start to
I
see the
bet.
world differently, right? You're not just walking around on yourself. All of a sudden your eyes are
Oh, yeah.
catching every little thing that could be possibly crazy. And so
Wow.
yeah, I like you and was not too much of a city kid, but I
hmm
did enjoy some of the aspects of the city. I remember some of the funnest times I ever had was dosing really hard and going into Golden Gate Park.
Oh, it is a world-class park, you guys.
And it's got
It's
its own.
it's it's phenomenal park. God, there's so much to it.
Oh, you could just do that all
Mm.
day, every
You
day,
never
right?
see it. Yeah, I
And
never
never
see it
see the
all.
whole thing.
I
And
still to this day, after 25 or 30 years, I still find new parts of it all the time.
yes. And one of the things they have in there is the botanical gardens, right?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
so fun because you go in there and then you can almost feel like you're in a different country in
Mm,
every little place. Oh, I'm in Uruguay now. And there's even redwoods with the whole redwood, with creeks and everything.
mm.
It's really just magical.
Yeah,
And
really
so
well maintained. Yeah, and I guess apparently a lot of kids stay, sleep, and live in the park, which is hard to believe because it's not a junky park at all. I mean, it's just really well maintained by the city and just quite beautiful and very botanically diverse. But there are all these little niches and little places that I could see people who just post up and sleep.
Well, that would
little
be some of
groves and
the weirdest thing, right? Because like you'd be all, walking through and you'd kind of have your like little magical space you're creating for yourself. And all of a sudden, like oh, I'm in the redwood forest. But then you'd like look up and it would be like a fence. And then there's like Judah and like all the, like cars driving by. And you're like, oh, that's right.
right.
I'm in the middle of the city,
Yeah, you forget it. I know.
And like, so there's like places where you could just kind of create not being in the city and take respite. But then there's also this great kinetic energy that the city has and a great rich history.
Yeah, very. Yeah, and if especially we're talking about counterculture and just free thinking and the arts and the music. It's I one of my favorite things to this day. I mean, it never gets old. So our guest, he lives right on that original block where the Grateful Dead house was, and he really he was there since before they moved in and after they left, and just within that block, so much went down. To think of the powerhouse artists and musicians that would walk that block. There's something about that. I don't get too much into like ley lines or like power, meridians on the earth and stuff, but there's certainly something about that particular block. And I know, I've heard it said in the 60s, it was people gravitated there because it was a like really affordable rent, in the early 60s. And so like a lot of students and artists kind of flock there. But I don't know which came first, but it's changed. I'm sure it's changed a lot. I think my fantasies about what it was like in the 60s are probably far loftier than the reality of it. You see, just some gorgeous like photographs that evoke such emotions with, from really that first summer of love, like, 66 and 67, before people really started flocking there. Just there seems to be this innocence, you just see these beautiful men and women, barefoot or topless, just cruising around playing flutes and, laughing and hugging. And it has that kind of romanticism to it. But of course now it's a grimier, I'd say. It's definitely still a shops district. There's really just a lot of funky head shops and then tattoo shops and some good restaurants, right? And Amoeba
amazing
Records
places
is there.
like the Red Vic and Love
Red
and
Vic is
Hate
amazing.
and all of these kind of things. So there's been like a revival,
It seems like it, doesn't it, recently in the last like 10 years?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And one of the things about San Francisco, if you've never been there, is it is not a flat city. It's small in square footage, but there's like all these hills in it, right?
Yeah.
And when we were there, we had this crazy bus and the clutch went out on it, so you couldn't go in reverse. And the thing about the city is you have to parallel park a lot.
Oh God, on a hill.
On a hill, right? So we would have to drive all the way around to like,
holy Christ,
find it. Yeah, it was just insanity and stuff. And we even one time we were like trying to escape the city, because that's another thing, is once you're in it, it's just kind of like becomes your world, and then you almost feel like it's kind of like a vortex. And so we were like, okay, we're going to leave. And, again, with a van, again, with a lot of people, again, with a lot of your shit in it. And so we start going across the Oakland Bay Bridge, and all of a sudden, like we run out of gas and the bridge goes up and then it kind of crests and then it starts to go down. So we're like, okay, no problem. Like everybody just get out and push,
just
right?
had to get over the hump, huh?
Right. So it's like Buffalo and Mark and me and everything. And I think like Dawn and Larry are like in the front driving. It's just this like van of wackadoodles. And so, they're like, okay, just push. And it's like people are going on the bridge and it's like rush hour and everybody's honking and like flipping us off and being like, what are you guys doing? So all of a sudden we get to the crest and we're like, phew, this is much more relaxing. We're not pushing like 10 people's worth of stuff and dogs up a bridge now. And then all of a sudden it starts to go down, and now it's got the weight of not only an entire ride, but all of our stuff in it, and it just starts going faster and faster. So we're on the back of the VW bus bumper, and our fingers are literally hanging in that little metal rim.
Oh my gosh.
And we're just all of a sudden, with the weight of it and the downhill of the bridge, we're literally cruising to where my friend's braking not to start going like 80
And you all are
miles an
just hanging
hour.
onto the backside
Right?
of
And
it?
people just are, all they can see are like, there goes those hippies from the Haight, you know? They're just riding on the bridge, hanging out on the bus, you know? I think we pulled over in Treasure Island, which is kind of like this military complex, and we were like, dude, we need some like gas or whatever. And they're like, we're not going to help you. And AAA wouldn't come out because it was like a military thing. And so we're just like, okay, well, whatever. This is before, you know, cell phones really. So we just take out our skateboards and our drums and all of that stuff, and we just start like camping and like laying out. And eventually the military people were like, we'll do anything to get you guys out of here. So there was no escaping the city too. That's like another thing, you know? and so, you know,
That's an excellent story.
And so it's so impressive when you see people who really live like a lifetime through that.
Yeah, it really is. I've always had a fantasy, and I think now it'll have to wait till another lifetime of having a good, you know, just doing living in San Francisco for like, you know, 5 years or something, just to feel that and experience that. And I'm a country guy, and but I have such a soft place for San Francisco. I have just fallen in love with that city so hard since I moved out here in the late 90s. And like I said, I before the pandemic, I would go down there a few times a month for several days. And gosh, now these days I just go to play music, and I'll stay at my friend's, our guest house, and we'll just jam, and I'll just kind of go for walks and just walk around the neighborhood and just kind of soak it in, you know, sometimes dose a little bit and just, walk through the park. But there was a time when I first would go there. It was when I just started growing weed for the first time. I had like a little 400-watt lamp in a closet up in Humboldt, and you know, this was back in the day when it was worth a lot of fucking money. And I would take my whatever half pound of homegrown bud, and God, I look back on this now, I'm like, God damn, that was ballsy. Like, I don't know, I would just never do that these days, and nothing bad happened, but it was just like, I surprised myself sometimes how much we would just step out into the world. And because I literally would just drive down there, I don't want to know a single soul. I'd go park my truck. In my backpack, I'd have my half pound broken up into eighths, real eighths, by the way, like 3.5 grams.
Wow, you're so generous.
Real eighths, you know, and
Yes.
which is disturbing the balance of the street. But I'll get to that, because that kind of was working for me. So, and I would just start walking around through the city, through the Haight Ashbury. I would stay in that neighborhood, and, you know, buds, you know, as people were walking by, if they looked kind of somewhat cool, not too square, they could be cops. And then, and I'd sell them to like the people like that. And then what happened is, once I got to the park, there was this whole network of like street kids that, you know, had been there for a long time. You know, they all had their street kid names, you know, like, you know, Badger and fucking, you know, Sunflower and Rainbow, and, you know, and these were kids, all different stories, but there was this thing, this system, this way that stuff went down there that was just fascinating. So I would, you know, within a couple hours of being there, I'd have already made a couple friends who were street kids. I would give them an eighth, a real eighth. Like I said, they would go out. I think what they'd do is they'd split it in half, take out a nug of each one, and then sell each one for 50, and then come back and get another one. And I would just kick it on Hippie Hill, which is just this kind of a famous hill in the park where I think a lot of gatherings used to happen. There's always a drum circle. Seems like there's always a drum circle there on a nice day. And I just would post up on the hill and just chill. And then these kids would just work my bags for me. And then I always got paid. There was only one person that didn't pay me for an ounce he owed me. And I ended up like, next time I was back in the city, I pulled up to park, and he was standing at a payphone right where I happened to park. And I was like,
yes,
I was like,
awesome.
Hey dude, what's up? You didn't send me that. You didn't Western Union me that, you know, and he paid me, and he paid. But
Wow, that's crazy. That's
besides that, it was very
awesome.
honorable. The kids, they hustled. They were so grateful for the extra work, and everyone was happy. So
Yeah, everyone's like, being a runner and like
hmm
jamming, but there was also you could be a spanger too. And I know like as far as like all the kids, you much rather have like work,
that's
or
right. Yeah,
some like weed to sell or a way to make like an honorable living rather than like needing the like spare change or what we would call like spanging and stuff.
yeah. Every kid I met was up for working, and they would just hit the street hard, and yeah, I was really surprised how and they were, as I would talk to and get to know some of them, they would say, yeah, that there was a self-regulating kind of ethos there. You didn't rip people off. If you did, you just weren't. Your name was just dirt. And
Yeah, but it
yeah.
definitely didn't mean that you didn't get ripped off. Okay, so one time
Mm.
I was with like
I must have maybe
Wayne,
I might have been just fortunate.
Wayne and Tony, and no, it wasn't necessarily in those kind of circumstances. So they like you'd go to like the laundromat and everyone had to do their laundry, and right next to it was like the bathrooms and in the stalls, there's like that space at the bottom of the stall door, right?
Okay.
And so Wayne was using the restroom and his pants were down, right?
Oh
And
shit.
so this crackhead, like in
Oh
Lower
damn.
Haight, decided he was gonna like, try to steal his pants to get his wallet, but he had a chain wallet, right? So when he went to pull the pants, like
Shit was
he
attached.
kept on he holds
Had a
the
Wayne on
wallet,
the
right?
other end,
And then
huh?
he opens the bathroom door and he goes running down the thing like no pants on,
Oh
holding
man.
his chain wallet while the good crackhead's
The
trying to run
crack.
off.
I
And
caught
finally
a
Crackhead
crackhead. I
drops
caught a
the
crackhead.
pants and like, the chain wallet saved the day. But for the
Oh
most part,
shit. Well,
but those weren't
That was Lower Haight too, which is a bit
yeah,
rough. It's a
exactly.
bit rougher.
A bit rougher.
Once you get past Fillmore,
Yeah.
my always sense was the vibe kind of changed.
Yes,
You
that's
too?
true.
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
just got a little grittier and a little more hardcore crackhead vibes.
Yes.
But
And
nothing like, I guess when the boys were in town and stuff, because like I never was hitting the Haight when Jerry was alive, but afterwards, so many Phil shows and Bobby shows at the Warfield and stuff, and it was always just a complete experience. And especially when Phil had Terrapin Crossroads, I would just do this over and over again because to me it was like the perfect afternoon. I'd start the day down the Haight Ashbury, I'd play some music, I'd take some acid, and then have like the first couple hours of my trip just in the sunshine on the Haight Ashbury, and then get a drive up across the bridge to Marin, and then see Phil play. And it was just like such a quintessential California afternoon.
yeah.
I couldn't get enough of that.
No, you cannot. And
Yeah,
it's really amazing I can see why someone would spend like their lifetime living in that place and being a part of the fabric of it, and literally within moments you can be in the beach, in the park, at the ocean.
yeah.
You can be right over the bridge in
Museums
Marin.
or
There's like art and culture, and some of the art that has come out of Haight Ashbury is some of the,
yeah.
in my humble opinion,
Yes,
the best
same.
art in like the whole world, right?
It's incredible. The artistic vein that runs through there is very real.
Yeah.
It just seems to attract, I think, artists and musicians, and it's really cool to just witness all the cross pollination. And it's now it's such wide genres of everything. It's you get punk vibes and you get all these different expressions down there. It can be pretty. It's got some darker punk energy there too. It's not all.
It's colorful,
It's
like
very colorful.
to have like that whole realm of humanity and the city. It's an international city,
Yes. Yeah.
and each of the neighborhoods are so unique, and the way that Haight Ashbury lies in that part of the city, it's kind of at an intersection or a crossroads between, juxtaposed against all these neighborhoods, and each of them have like such a rich addition to like the history and story of San Francisco.
That's right.
Well, we'll just have to turn it over to our guest, our very special guest this week, Henry Strauch, aka Tsvi Deer, my good friend, mentor, teacher, San Francisco original, and just a walking well of history. couldn't thank you enough, man. And hey, Laura, let's just meet back here after we let Tsvi take it from here, and then we'll talk about some of what we thought.
Synchronicity. Three things happened in 1938. Albert Hofmann discovered LSD. The Nazis invaded Vienna, Austria in March 1938. That was called the Anschluss. And Harry Tsvi Strauch was born in Nazi Vienna, June 21st, 1938.
Still under Nazi rule.
Oh, yes. It was the beginning of Nazi rule.
Wow.
So they came in March and took over the entire community, entire country of Austria. And the Gestapo came for my father twice. One time he paid off one of the cops with a gold watch, and the second time he hid out in a neighbor's apartment, and then he paid smugglers to take him through Switzerland to Belgium, which was neutral, and where we had cousins in Antwerp. And I was maybe about 6 months old, and my mother had a sister who was living in London, studying philosophy at the University of London, and so she sent my mother papers to come over as a domestic to England. And the only problem was my mother was able to get on the train and go to Antwerp, and she wasn't going to be bothered, but she didn't have any papers for me.
Oh,
So
you were an infant. You were an infant at this point, yeah?
She didn't. Yeah, I was about 6 or 8 months old. So she decided to get on the train and go through Belgium to Antwerp. And when the Gestapo stopped the train, they weren't supposed to be in Belgium, but they were already roaming around there. She said, "Are any Jews in this car?" My mother kept her mouth shut.
Wow, man.
So otherwise I would have been a Schindler's List kid.
That's right.
Anyway, they made it to Antwerp, and my cousins got them a room, and the Jewish community supported them for about a year. And then we had cousins in Hollywood, and they sent us affidavits. So in 1941, after having lived in Belgium for 2 years, the war already was full blast. We made it to New York on a ship, and we lived in New York for about 2 years. And then we had cousins in San Francisco, and my father came out here and got a job and then brought us out here. So I came to San Francisco in 43, and I grew up in San Francisco. Went to high school here, then I went to Cal in Berkeley, and then I got a master's degree from Harvard University when Timothy Leary was there. My wife and I, after Harvard, we came back to San Francisco, and we bought a house on Ashbury Street, 2 doors down from where the Grateful Dead lived. Well, we came here first, and then we had already had a folk art gallery, and then we opened up the third hippie shop called In Gear down on Haight Street, and then was part.
What year was that?
That was July 1966.
All right.
And the Dead
one of the first on that in the neighborhood, yeah.
Yeah, we were the third shop. Nasitica was first. Peggy Caserta, who owned Nasitica, was one of Janice's lovers. She wrote a book called Going Down with Janice. When I was at Harvard, I was studying philosophy, and I was the librarian of the philosophy library. And in that building, Leary used to have his graduate seminars, and they were beginning to do the mushroom experiments with prisoners and with his students. And one day I saw this poster for a lecture. It was called LSD and the Mystical Experience, Alan Watts and Timothy Leary. So I went to that lecture.
Was that your first exposure to psychedelic consciousness?
Somewhat, because I had been studying religion when I was undergraduate at Cal, because I was studying philosophy and also Near Eastern languages and studying the Bible in the original Hebrew and medieval texts and so on. And my wife had smoked marijuana back in the mid 50s when she was growing up in LA, and she was hanging out with these jazz musicians going out to Venice Beach. But then when I met her in Berkeley, she wasn't smoking any weed then, but when we came back from Harvard, we had at our first gallery, we ran into a couple of neo beats poets that used to come in, and then we started smoking weed. And then from that, then in 1964, we heard about something called LSD on sugar cubes. And that's when we took our first acid trip.
On the East Coast at Harvard?
No, that was in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
64. Because there were these doctors. It was still legal. It was legal.
Must have been Sandoz. Yeah, Sandoz acid.
Yeah, it was legal until October 6, 1966. And in 64 and 65, there were these therapists down on the peninsula who, for $125, you got an 8-hour session and a dose of Sandoz.
How about that?
Yeah.
Hefty for back then, though.
That was back then.
So at Harvard, that's where you got your first degree in major bullshit.
No, I got my first degree in Berkeley in 1959, and then I went to Harvard from 59 to 61.
Okay.
And I got an AM because Harvard doesn't give degrees in English. The degrees are in Latin. So I got an Ars Magister, which means Master of Arts, MA. But I have an AM, so that means I went to a real Tony school.
Ivy League, baby.
And then, yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah, you know, Tsvi. So I've known Tsvi. We've known each other probably about at least 15 years, man. And I never knew that about you, that you had spent your childhood in San Francisco and then went back to the East Coast. I always thought you were from the East Coast. That's really interesting.
Oh yeah, no.
Where'd you go to high school?
I was only back east for 2 years, and then we came back to San Francisco. I lived
You're
in
a real
Berkeley
San Francisco original. Okay.
Yeah.
What was your high school?
High school was Lowell High School, the old Lowell High School, which is the academic high school of San Francisco.
Nice.
And I was on the cross country championship team, and I was a pole vaulter. I won third place all city, and I was also in the slide rule club.
what the fuck?
People don't even know what a slide rule is.
I don't know. I don't either. Do you?
Is that like the math club?
Yeah, slide rule.
Oh yeah, good guess.
The slide rule is 3 pieces of wood with numbers on them, and if you can multiply, divide, and do tangents. But you know, this is when Univac was at Berkeley, and it was 3 rooms of tubes, and all it could do was add, subtract, and multiply and divide.
Oh, gee.
No, it's kind of like an abacus, you know, in the way that it's just an instrument that you can like manipulate with your hands and move around to get different mathematical stuff, right?
Right. I actually learned how to do the abacus because we used to sell them at one of our galleries. So I had a little book and learned how to do that. But that, unless you keep doing it, it's too slow. I like computers.
Wow. But that was before electricity was invented, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's way over.
Oh no. No.
Well, that's some next level nerd shit, man. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Well, what I was interested in is you were talking earlier about, 66, 67, and you mentioned when LSD became illegal. Can you actually recall when LSD was made illegal, like back in 66, 67?
Here's what happened. one afternoon, so my wife and I would go down to our shop in Gear we were on the 1500 block, which was really the center of the Haight Ashbury hippie scene. Nasidica was there, the psychedelic, they were at 1510, the psychedelic shop was at 1535, and we were at 1580. And then there were about 5 other shops up and down that same block. And word traveled very fast, and one afternoon someone said, the Grateful Dead are playing down at the Panhandle. So I told my wife, you stay here and
man the shop, huh?
She was more interested in making the sales, so I said, okay, you stay here. I'm going down the Panhandle. And what it was October 6, 1966, the day that the state of California had, that was the last day it was legal in the state. And so they were holding a love, I think they called it the love pageant or love rally. And the people that organized that, Alan Cohn and Michael Bowen. Alan Cohn was a poet who became the editor of the San Francisco Oracle, the newspaper that kind of represented the whole hippie movement here. And Michael Bowen was an artist. So they founded something called the Psychedelic Rangers, which included Alan and Michael, and then me and Ron Thelen from the Psychedelic Shop, and Gene Anthony, a famous photographer. And we're the ones that planned the Human Being for January 14th, 1967. And it turned out to be a fantastic day out at the polo fields. And
What do you remember about how that idea came to be? Like take us back to when you guys were just the original spring for that idea.
Well, the spring, the love rally turned out to be so successful, and Alan Cohn was always into wanting to have big community events, and Michael Bowen also was a big mucky muck type kind of guy. So they kind of were they were grandiose ideas, and they corralled me and Ron because we were making the money to come in, because we ended up paying for all the posters and for all the production. And actually, I have a picture of our press conference that happened the week before.
Oh yeah, we'll put that up on our website.
We thought maybe 5,000 people are going to show close. The newspapers say 20,000. It was more like 50,000. And Allen Ginsberg was there doing some Hindu chanting on the stage, and then Gary Snyder, the beat poet, read some poems, and then Lenore Candell read some of her poems, and Leary, tune in, turn on, drop out, tune in, turn on, and drop out, gave that big speech. And then the Dead played, and I think Big Brother and the Holding Company played. And then in the middle of the afternoon, this biplane flew over the field, and thousands of roses were thrown out of the plane. And then all of a sudden, some guy parachutes out of the plane into the center of the crowd and starts handing out white lightning, and that was Owsley Stanley.
The one and only.
So that turned into, so that night, my wife and I were there, we took acid. So a bunch of people came over to the house, and we're all sitting around, it was around 8 o'clock, and we're all still high. And I had some hand drums from when I'd been in an Israeli dance troupe, and there were Malachi was there with a guitar. He's was a psychedelic musician, and we just started playing improvised music, and that was the birth of the Amplified Home. We went on to create a band, whose premise was we get high from the music, and if you get high from listening to it, we think that's great too.
We've done our job.
Here's an interesting story. In '68, you heard of Synanon? It was like AAA, Alcoholics Anonymous, for drugs.
I've only heard of Al-Anon.
Well, this was called Synanon, and they had a big warehouse in downtown San Francisco where they all lived and so on, and we were invited to play a wedding on an afternoon. So we get there, and we're on a stage, and it's in a round. We were in the center, and the people were around, and we start playing, and people are dancing and coming up to hear the music. And after 2 songs, the counselor that's running the thing comes over to us, and he says, "Stop. You have to leave right now. Everyone's getting high from the music.
You're freaking them out."
Yeah, they're all going wild.
I can't believe it. I mean, it was incredible.
You turned on the wedding party, man.
So we packed up and we left. And then another time we were invited to play for these, in '67, there was a meeting of psychologists here in San Francisco. They were discussing what is this psychedelic experience. So I gave a big long talk, and some other guys gave some talk, and then a couple of smart asses kept saying, "But what is it? What is it? What is it like?" So my drummer, Brian Edmond, who is a very fantastic sculptor and a very impulsive, artistic type, he got so pissed off he started pounding away on the drums, and I got on my vibraphone, and the guitar started playing. We just played like crazy for 10 minutes, and then boom, we stopped, and everybody was in awe and silence. That was the end.
Yeah.
Or just the beginning.
Well, Tsvi, it sounds like that was the beginning of. Correct me if I misunderstood this, but that human being, that jam at your place began really what I think of as a tradition of something something I'm so grateful to you for, because that home now is called Frisco Wave Sound Lab, and you've opened up that same space to a multitude of different musicians and artists over the years, right?
Yeah. Yes. I even did it. We used to do it up at my ranch in Mendocino at Deer Valley. And, yes, I've continued doing it here. Some years I haven't been playing, but, now I'm back into it, and you're one of my compatriots.
That's right. That's right. That's how you really got me started on music doing that, man. And it's such a fantastic environment because you took that same psychedelic sensibility. I mean, you have this approach to music that's been so wonderful and so inclusive of artists, in that there really are no rules. You have this welcome space for musicians to just really explore freely, and the emphasis is on the freedom, right, man?
Rule number 1, there are no rules. Rule number 2, refer to rule number 1.
Motherfuck.
And then one of my teachers, the famous jazz musician Bobby Hutcherson, said there are no bad notes.
Dig it.
And a famous jazz pianist, V.J. Ayers, said, trust in the process. And Denny Zeitlin, a famous jazz pianist and a psychoanalyst who's still practicing and is alive, said you have to get out of the way of the music in order to let the music happen. And that's what we do. We get out of the way of the music.
And the music happens, baby, let me tell you.
Well, it sounds like to me that you're like a real patron of like the music and art. You were like one of the early people in the HIP, the Haight Independent Proprietors too, right?
Right. What happened was a black couple that we knew opened an ice cream shop slightly off of Haight on Cole Street. It was called Quasars, after the newly discovered quasar in the sky. And we said, hey, Cliff and Gloria, you got to join the Haight Ashbury Merchants Association, because Ron Thelen of the Psychedelic Shop and I were members of the regular association. And so they said, okay, we'll join. So then when it came to a vote, they were turned down. So I went to the president, Mendel Herskovitz, and I said, Mendel, what is this bullshit? And he goes,
Yes.
What are we practicing racism here? Come on, Jew boy, let's get this straight. And he goes, well, they're not on 8th Street. So we said, Ron and I said, well, we're quitting and we're starting a new organization called HIP, Haight Independent Proprietors. And we had a big news conference, and that's how that got started. And within 2 years, there were like 30 of us in that group. And we, what we did is we also founded something called the HIP Job Co-op, which we ran out of one of the stores called Wild Colors, so that people who were coming to the Haight and didn't have any work or anything could get started doing, different jobs and so on. So it wasn't just an organization. We, and by the way, here's the origin of the phrase, the love generation. So Ron Thelen and I wanted, first of all, we began to notice that with all the new hippies coming, because of all the media after the BN 67, they were just beginning to pour into the Haight every weekend, and teenagers and runaways. And the cops would never show up when there was trouble, and they were just down the block at the Park Station, which is like 4 blocks from where we were. So we had a meeting with Police Chief Cahill, and Ron and I walk in, and he goes, what do you guys call yourselves? And we go, what? Well, I know in North Beach they got the Beats and then the Beatniks, and what are you guys? And so Ron, who used to be kind of a super new age Christian, goes, we're the new community. And the police chief goes, no, you're not. You are the love generation. And that was the first time that expression was ever used by anybody. It was in the newspaper the next day.
Wow, so he coined that phrase.
He coined that phrase, the love generation.
How about that?
Yeah.
That's ironic. I had no idea that the police were involved in that.
Well, there was also one cop who was very friendly. His name was Captain Sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another cop who was always busting everybody, an undercover cop. His name was Art Garens. And we had, anyhow, let's see. Yeah, keep going.
You know what? Oh yeah, cool. You know what? You know what I think of when I think about that, Tsvi, that time, and having not been there, I've always imagined it and kind of fantasized what it would have been, what it must have been like. So from your perspective, like when acid really started coming onto the scene and the love generation was really beginning and blooming, what changes did you notice around you in the Haight, like with attitudes and with social relationships?
Well, for one, there were no homeless. When people showed up, if you were walking on Haight Street at night and you saw some young teenager wandering around or something, and everyone would be taken home to everyone had big apartments or big homes, and they had a crash pad. So nobody was sleeping on the streets. None of this bullshit that we have since the 80s when Reagan kicked everybody out of the mental institutions, and after the Vietnam War, when the veterans started falling through the cracks, people banded together. We went to the dances at the Fillmore or the Avalon Ballroom, which was run by the family dog. We enjoyed music. People began to think about organic food, because if you're putting bad gas into your car, it's going to run bad. If you put in good gas, good food, you're going to feel better and be better. So that was kind of part of the start of the organic food movement. And we actually had one of our hippie merchants. He was a blind jazz musician, Jerry Seelan, and his wife was blind. They had a store on Page Street called Far-Fetched Foods. And they also used to deal drugs, and even though they were blind. And then he moved up in 70, was up in Santa Rosa, and had a health food store there. And then he got popped in mid-70s for huge amount of Thai sticks, Thai weed, and went to prison for a while. I don't know. I think they both have passed on since then.
You notice the influence of acid, kind of in the values of the culture that were changing in the neighborhood.
Well, for one, let's all right. Look, the 50s was called the silent generation because everybody was just in the kids and in college and in high school. All we did was study, and people drank alcohol. And it was the beginning of rock and roll, but it was Elvis and maybe Stevie Wonder. Things hadn't really taken off yet. And the free speech movement in 61 in Berkeley kind of was the beginning of the ferment. And as North Beach, also the Beats were in North Beach and in Greenwich Village in the 50s, and they were critical of American culture and trying to rant and rave about honesty and religious meditation, and Kerouac, Ginsberg.
Yeah.
And then the beatniks in San Francisco were in the late 50s. I used to go to a thing called the Party Pad, which was a big warehouse in North Beach that Big Daddy Eric Nord used to run. And we would dance to Elvis and, I don't know, a couple other musicians on records. That was in the mid-50s. And then North Beach was getting expensive, and people were beginning to move out of North Beach toward the Haight Ashbury. The Haight Ashbury was central to San Francisco State, University of San Francisco, UCSF Med Center, City College. So, and it had been a middle-class neighborhood like in the 20s and from the 90s, 1890s up into the 20s or 30s, but then it had gone downhill and was a very inexpensive, quiet neighborhood. And so a lot of students and artists began to move here in the mid-60s, and by 66 is when things began to sprout up. And it was concomitant with the switch from alcohol to marijuana and the use of psychedelics and mind expansion. And the other center of, and then there was Berkeley, which was very much more oriented and began the peace movement, actually, the anti-Vietnam war, the anti-Vietnam parades and protests. And they kind of always thought, oh, you hippies are doing nothing but getting high. And so one time there was this march from Berkeley, a peace march from, I think in 66, from Berkeley to Oakland. And when they got to the Oakland line, the Hells Angels had formed a line all across the street, because a lot of them had been to Vietnam and were very pro-war.
Right.
And when the peace march got there, the Hells Angels said, you ain't going any further. And Ginsburg walked up and said, here, I want each one of you to try this. And he gave them each cap of acid. And in 15 minutes, there were smiles on everybody's face. And then they said, okay, you guys can march down to Oakland now.
Wow.
And that's a famous story.
That's
And
incredible.
okay, so the 700 block is very interesting because we were the first hippies to move here in March of 66. And in September 66, the Grateful Dead moved into 710 Ashbury, which is a few houses away from us. Across the street at 715, a rich couple, Don and Paula McCoy, bought that, and they owned the Sausalito heliport where the Grateful Dead used to rehearse in 67 and 68, and they also owned Olampali, which now is a public park, but back then was their own private huge space, and the Dead lived there for a while also. Anyway, when Don and Paula divorced, Paula took the house at 715, and she started to date the president of the San Francisco Hells Angels. And all of a sudden, there were 30 Hells Angels living across the street, and bikes up and down the street. And you didn't dare touch them, because if you did, your ass was in a sling, because there was a black guy that lived next door to them who one day moved one bike, and they all came running out, and they beat the shit out of the guy, and the next day he was in the hospital and the family moved away. So there were some other unfortunate incidents. The Hells
now,
Angels
were the Grateful Dead still living across the street at this point, or
oh
had they
yeah,
moved on?
The Grateful Dead lived while this happened, and
wow, so
Angels
across the street and the Grateful Dead on one side.
The Hells Angels were not the angels that they were made out to be by the bands. Another incident that happened, Lenore Kandel, the poetess, she and I had been in a Israeli dance troupe in North Beach in 63, 64, 65. She and my wife, Hyla, had been in this Jewish commie folk song hootenanny group down in Hollywood, Venice in the late 50s. And anyway, so she used to make jewelry for our gallery, and then all of a sudden she married this longshoreman dude, Bill Fritch, who was part of the Diggers. That's a whole other story.
Oh, wow, yes.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden Bill Fritch became Sweet William, the vice president of the Hells Angels. So Sweet William, Bill Fritch, and Lenore, they moved into the 715 where the Hells Angels were living. One day I was walking up Ashbury from my store in Gear, and I see Lenore coming down the street, and she's got two fucking black eyes. And I say, Lenore, what happened? Bill beat the shit out of me. She left that day. She never went back to that house again. She said, fuck, Jewish bitches do not take that kind of crap from anybody. You know, they're strong enough, and that's enough. She only needed to get beat up once.
Good for her.
And that was the end of that marriage. Anyway, so the Hells Angels, before the Hells Angels actually were in there, the building had been the offices for HALO, the Haight Ashbury Legal Organization, which was founded by Brian Rohan and Michael Stepanian. And Mouse, Stanley Mouse, the artist, he had a studio in there. And then the Dead had an office in there, but then they got moved out when Paula and Don bought the place. And then the Hells Angels. And then next door to them at 719 was Dottie Ivory. She was an older lady, black lady, that was a blues singer down in the Fillmore district. And she also owned 710 Ashbury, the house that she was renting to the Grateful Dead. So, and then up the block, Frank J. Chorka. He's the guy that, you know, the fist, the raised fist that was on a lot of
Fight the Power
posters. Yeah, Black Power, White, Jewish Power.
Fight the Power, yeah.
Yeah, the Power. He made that famous. He lived up the block at 743 Ashbury. And there were a couple of other dope dealers that lived in the middle, 760 Ashbury. And so anyway, there was...
What a scene.
There was a lot of activity going on here.
Whereas was everybody, like, paint us a picture of what a given day would be like. I mean, was everybody interacting together? Was there, what was
No.
No, okay.
No. People would interact down on Haight Street, you know, like Janis Joplin lived at 640 Ashbury, and the reason I saw her every day was the woman she was renting from, Bobby Brown, had a daughter the same age as my daughter, and they were both going to the Montessori school in Daly City, and I was driving them out there. So I'd go over there every day, and Janice was in her room, and I'd say hi. And I had already met Janice the year before when I drove her home from a concert in Monterey, and she used to come in. She used to come into In Gear. She bought her famous white fur hat from us. She bought a lot of her love beads from us, scarves, and she would come in every day. So here's a little interaction. One afternoon she comes in and she goes, "Hey, you know, we're in the studio, we're working on our second album, but we don't like the artist that the record company gave us to do the artwork." And my wife goes, "Yeah, so?" "Well, you know what I like? I like this artist that did this poster that's being shown at the print mint and it's around. It's called Keep on Truckin'. It's Mr. Natural kind of marching down the street. I like that." And that was R. Crumb. That was one of his first major public posters. And my wife said, "You know, I know that guy. I can introduce you to him." So my wife put R. Crumb together with Janis Joplin, Big Brother and the Holding Company, and that's how the album Cheap Thrills, with all of that weird art on it, was created. And after that, they both were super famous.
That's one of the more iconic album covers of the 60s, man.
Yeah, and then after that, he came out with Snatch, Zap Comics, Jizz, what else? Yeah, those were the comics. I have those in my library.
Stevie, it sounds like Hyla was really doing a lot of really cool stuff. And I heard you mention love beads in your store. Is that one of the things that she was in charge of, like buying different materials and picking things out?
Yes. She basically invented that, and she always was buying
the love beads.
Basically, yes, because before the 60s, we had a folk art gallery up in Pacific Heights, and we were buying and selling jewelry and beads. And when we opened In Gear, we started having the neighborhood designers make clothing for us. We had jewelers making earrings for us. And one day, Herb Cain, the famous gossip columnist for the Chronicle, San Francisco Chronicle, he wrote an article saying, "Last Saturday I walked into this store and I saw these girls making strings of beads. I think I'm going to call them love beads." And that's how that came about. And he also kind of invented hippie, because he said all those people in the Haight Ashbury, they're not beatniks, and they're not hip. They're hippies.
Somewhere in between and not a part at all.
Yeah. And no, my wife didn't take shit from anybody. Here's a little interesting story. So every afternoon George B. Leonard, who was an editor for Looks, came here in early '67 to see what was going on, and he ended up taking acid and really loved it, and he wrote these 2 fantastic articles for Look, and this was right after The Human Being, and after that, the national media just went crazy with The Love Generation, Haight Ashbury, and all of a sudden we had 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds showing up at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Well, excuse me, you're supposed to be in school in Ohio, in Podunk. What are you doing here? So the cops started doing sweeps every afternoon. And they would bring a paddy wagon, and they would just kind of amble down Haight Street real slow. Do they see anybody? And one afternoon, they saw 2 young girls who were in our store, and my wife said, just keep your mouth shut. So the cop comes in, and he confronts the girls, and my wife said, would you please leave them alone? Those are my customers. And they say, how old are you? And the girls go, oh, we're 14. Where are you from? We're from Iowa. Okay, come on with me. So he starts taking them out to put them in this old-fashioned looking paddy wagon, and my wife was so pissed off, she ran out the front door and she started screaming, leave those girls alone. Everybody came running out of their stores. What's going on? The cop was so embarrassed. He could have charged her with interfering with the rest, but he didn't dare.
He was intimidated.
Oh, my God. So I go, would you come back in here, please?
Handled it.
So that was the end of that. She handled that, yes. And as time went on, what was happening before the acid became big, a lot of people have been doing speed. And that was really big, methamphetamine.
Which was what, like pills, speed pills? Or
what? Pills and stuff, but also
STP?
No,
not yet, I don't think.
No, STP was something that Owsley invented, and then he realized it was too strong, and he stopped making it.
Yeah. Speed was really on the scene with the beats and the 50s.
Dextroamphetamines.
Oh, yeah.
Crystal meth, and people were shooting that up. And with acid, a lot of people quit doing that. And then did you see a lot of problems with speed at that point? Like, were people getting strung out? It kind of burned out because people stopped using it. And what happened was the diggers and some of the more Marxist-oriented people began saying, oh, we got to leave the city, we got to go to the country, back to the country thing. This was like in late 68. Plus the diggers and Ron Thelen of the Psychedelic Shop, they had an event called Death of the Hippie, where they got a flatbed truck, put a coffin on it and filled it with lots of paper money, and they drove it down Haight Street, and that was called Death of the Hippie. And so this back to the land movement. So a lot of people started moving out, but also some of the big bands began using heroin, like, for example, Big Brother and the Holding Company. Gurley and his wife, Nancy, she OD'd in 69 up on the Russian River, and then Janice was already heavy into it, and I think Jerry started somewhere around 68, 69 doing heroin.
Was it always a part? Was it always a part of the scene, or did you notice
No,
at a certain point when it came in and it became acceptable socially?
It became acceptable to the higher ups, the band members, and some of the dealers, but most of the people were not that interested in it. And I tried it 3 times, and it was the most boring, uneventful drug that I could even imagine ever wanting to take. I mean, it wasn't the high, it was a low. And
after acid, which is so spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, so as people began to move out by 69, what happened was a lot of card sharks and pimps started showing up from the Tenderloin and kind of trying to fleece the tourists who were coming to look at the hippies. And so things began to get a little ugly on the street. And by 71, every single hippie shop was gone and half of Haight Street was boarded up, just the way it is now. All boarded up. And from 71 till 76, Haight Street was basically dead. And it was only with the start of the Shady Grove, which was a restaurant with music, that Pablo Heising started, and then he put on the first Haight Ashbury Street Fair in 78. That was kind of the rebirth of the Haight Ashbury as a commercial street, even though a lot of hippies had still been in the neighborhood. The street turned into a mess from 70 to 76. It was nothing. It was just miserable.
So that first wave of the Summer of Love really came to, it seems like that came to a close around 1970.
The Summer of Love came to a close at the end of 68. Some people like Dennis McNally claim the real Summer of Love was 1966. By 1967, it was the big commercialization of it. That's one intellectual approach to it. I think everything was pretty interesting until 68, and then of course, then there was Altamont was after Woodstock. Yeah, so Woodstock happened, and we decided we're not going to Woodstock. Well, what the fuck do we have to go there? We go to Fillmore and the Avalon. We're not going to bust our ass to go there.
That's right.
So,
were you interacting with any of the local bands at that point, like the Grateful Dead? Did you ever make it up to Olin Poly?
The Amplified Home played at Olin Poly one Sunday afternoon. We jammed with Mickey Hart.
Oh, tell us about that.
And we heard that the band. I think this was after they had lived there, but there was a commune going on, and they had Sunday afternoon jams. So we went there, the band and my wife, and we went to the upstairs room where the music was, and Mickey was playing drums, and I played my vibraphone, and my guitarist played the guitar. We jammed for about an hour, and then Owsley is running after this 16-year-old girl, and the next thing I know, they're sitting on the couch, and he's shooting her up with something, and then she kind of passes out, and then he wakes her up, and I don't know, they left. But that was one of my encounters with Owsley.
Okay, wow.
Okay, and the Diggers, they were trying to, they said, we want to free everything up, we want to give people free food, and so they started baking bread and giving it away at the Panhandle every afternoon, and they would dumpster dive at the supermarkets and get donations from the produce market, pass out food to people. So one evening when HIP was having a meeting in Gear, they burst in. It was Peter Berg, who was the brains and Mr. Brilliant. And then Mr. Asshole Clown, Peter Coyote, whose real name is Peter Cohen, he comes in, and Bill Fritsch was their bodyguard. They come in, and they stop the meeting, and they go, "Hey, you hippies are making money off you merchants are making money off the hippies. You gotta pay us, because we're feeding them." So my wife goes, she whispers in my ear, "Ask them how much they want." So I say, "How much do you guys need?" I was the president.
Yeah.
And they go, "We need $75 a month." And my wife says to me, "Tell them they can have it and get the fuck out of here." So I say, "You guys can have it." My wife says, "Get the fuck out of here. Here's the money." So that's how we dealt with the diggers. And anyway, they had an interesting setup. They had a store called the Free Frame of Reference, where they got stuff donated and they gave it away for free. And the Free Frame of Reference was you being yourself in, I don't know. Anyway, that's what it was called, Free Frame of Reference.
Hey, did you ever be? Oh, go ahead, please.
Go on.
I say, did you ever end up meeting Jerry back in those times?
Well, we saw them every day because they'd come out of their house and we'd be coming out to go to the street. We'd say hi or something. And then in September of '67, there was going to be a peace march all the way from Market Street up Haight Street to Kezar Stadium. And Neil Young, Joan Baez, Big Brother, I think Grateful Dead were going to play at it. So my wife wanted to do an American flag window, but we had to be real careful because back then, if you used the flag to make clothes, or if you burned it, of course, if you were a draft dodger, you were going to jail. But if you made clothes out of it, that was a big taboo, not the way it is today, where you can use the flag any way you want. So she had some antique flags and stuff, and she said, "Ask Jerry for his hat for the window." So I went next door to the dead house and said, "Hey, Jerry, can we borrow the hat for the window?" And that's how I got the hat. It was in our window for the display, and the Peace March went right by.
Captain Tripp's top hat.
Captain Tripp's hat, yep. And then afterwards, I said, "Hey, Jerry, we're taking the window down. You want to come and get the hat?" "No, you guys keep it."
How about that?
And then when I saw him at Bill Graham's funeral at Temple Emmanuel, he goes, I said, "Jerry," he said, "I've been crying for a week." I said, "Yeah, because you're not making the millions that Bill helped you make, right?" And I didn't say that to him. That's what I thought.
You thought that. Yeah.
That's why he was crying. And that's
Oh,
how he
man.
died. I said, "Well, I still got the hat. Oh, just keep it, would you?" And then in '87, when I was working for Bill Graham at the Greek Theater, I saw him again backstage, and I said, "Hey, Jerry, what about the hat?" "Keep it. Take care of it." So that's. Then when he died, I go, "Holy shit, I have that in my basement in the paper bag." And I run downstairs, and there it was. It had been there for 50 years.
Yeah.
And then we auctioned it at Christie's. So this whole notion that hard drugs supplanted the acid, that is a media myth, kind of, like I say. What happened really was a lot of the serious people moved to the country. They moved to Mendocino, to Humboldt, to New Mexico. So a lot of the active artists and thinkers left the neighborhood. And like I say, there also was a lot of petty crime on the street. It wasn't, I think people like Joel Selvin in his book, Summer of Love, and other writers try to always say, "Oh, it's the heroin, the heroin." Well, no one could afford the heroin. You could get acid cheaper than you can get the heroin for. It was the bands that were doing the heroin, so it wasn't really the people.
It never took hold. It never took hold in a major way, is what you're saying, on the street back then.
It wasn't. It was
more like
acid.
a high status rock star.
Yeah. That's kind of a myth that I like to take apart, because it didn't really happen that way. But they always like to. A lot of media writers like to always kind of point to that as that was the end of the Summer of Love and stuff like that.
Well,
That's important to clear. Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys did a lot of things as a community to kind of address that. It doesn't sound like the city of San Francisco is really able to resource or help everyone. From like what I'm hearing from you is all of you guys pulled together in one way or another, whether you were like part of HIP or you were like a digger, or like no matter how, it just seems like everyone sort of played a part or played a role to kind of help the wayward kids and kind of really make a community out of it.
Yes, I think that's a good way of putting it. That's what it was until about 68. And then, like I say, as people began to leave the neighborhood, and there was more tourists, and also, like I say, these sleazy characters coming up from the Tenderloin to fleece the tourists, that's when the street became kind of ugly. But in the beginning, there was a lot of community-oriented activity. Like, for example, there was a professor of philosophy here, Stan McDaniel, who you will be interviewing soon. He's now retired. He taught at Sonoma State University for 30, 40 years. He came to me one day in early 67. He says, all of these kids are coming here. We got to do something. I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, well, every Saturday afternoon, starting at 4 o'clock, they would sweep the street, or more like around 8 o'clock. They would sweep the street from, the cops would go from Masonic down to Stanton looking for any teenagers or runaways. He says, we have to take our band. He was a co-founder of the Amplified Home with me. We got to take our band and we got to play music and get the kids off the street. So we went to All Saints Church, which is an Episcopal church on Waller between Masonic and Ashbury, and we said Father Harris, and he was very pro-hippie. He was bald, so he started wearing a long hair wig. So he said, Father Harris, Stan and I are the Council for the Summer of Love, and we would like to use the back house on Saturday nights and invite all the teenagers off of Haight Street to come and listen to music, and that way they won't get arrested. And he said, sure. So for about 10 months in 67, every Saturday night we would print up flyers, distribute them on the street, say, come, free music, All Saints Church, don't get busted by the cops. And we had anywhere from 25 to 300 people there sometimes. And then one of the kids that came one night was from Nevada, and one Sunday morning I found him sleeping on my front steps after the concert, and I said, what's up? Well, I needed a place to stay. Do you think you guys could come up to Virginia City, and we're having a be-in next week? And I said, okay, well, bring the band. So my wife and my daughter and my drummer and my guitarist, we all head up there. And we finally get down this little dirt road, and we're almost there. And then there's a sheriff and 4 deputies, and they make us stop, and then they go, you can't go any further. And I said, well, we're the band playing at the be-in. no, you're not. Turn around and get out of here. So we went back to Virginia City, and we ended up at this very famous place where the first psychedelic bands played, the Red Dog Saloon. And we happened to meet the owner of it and told him we're a band. We were supposed to play at the Bean, and the sheriff kicked us out. And he said, well, you can play here and stay at my house tonight. So we played at the Red Dog Saloon, and then we drove down to his house and stayed there overnight.
So the sheriff, you stayed at his house?
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Okay, here's another funny.
Yeah, the Red Dog Saloon is legendary.
You want to hear a funny?
Legendary.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we do want to hear. Come on, man. What do you got?
No. This is off the.
Topic.
These are a couple of things that you don't want to put on the thing because they're too weird. Okay, the guitarist had.
I'll snip it out.
My guitarist was older than all of us. He had been a beatnik artist in North Beach in the early 60s, and he had used to make speed, and then he got busted. When he got out of prison in 64, he found a doctor in the Mission District who would write him a script, and then he went to the local pharmacy and would buy Dizoxin. And then at that point, the Dizoxin was in these plastic tablets so that you couldn't dissolve them and shoot them up. But he figured out if you soak them and then squish them, you can get the drug out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he was doing. So anyway, he was still shooting up all the time. And the next day when we were coming back from Virginia City, he was going to go see his parole officer, and he had to take a piss test. So he asked one of the guys in the band to give him a vial of his piss, and he finagled a little bag and ran a tube under his penis, and then he told the guy, I got to go, I can't pee in front of you. So he went into the John, and he pissed the other guy's piss in there so he wouldn't test positive.
Oh man! So he was probably the first like fake piss test
oh my
in
God.
history, man. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I have one other story about psychedelics. So I was at that time in '66. I was teaching the professor of philosophy, the head of the philosophy department in San Francisco State College, Jacob Needleman. I was teaching him biblical Hebrew. And he came to hear the Amplified Om play a couple of Saturday nights at All Saints Church, and he was very impressed. So he was teaching a course on religious experience, and he wanted to have us come and play for the students so they could see what a psychedelic experience was like. So 8 o'clock in the morning, we had to show up out at San Francisco State University. And we walked in the classroom, brought our instruments, and he says, okay, this is a psychedelic band. I want you to listen to it. So we played for an hour, and they were all eyes wide open, and they couldn't say a damn thing. And then we said, okay, guys, we'll see you later.
That's what you did best. Yes, man.
Yeah.
Go for it, Laura.
Wow. I mean, this is just like incredible. But I was wondering, like, during that time, what were your feelings about LSD? Like, it was kind of new and people really didn't know what it was, and it was kind of underground. Now it's like, there's research on it and everyone's heard of it, but there was like a time where it was really something really brand new. What was that like?
Well, for one, yes, it was very much frowned upon by the establishment, and many professors of chemistry and various doctors were all saying this will damage you and this is no good and it'll bring out bad experiences and on and on and on. And all we could fathom from that is that when we tried it, it was a amazing, beautiful experience, especially if you had someone on your first trip who explained and went with you and guided you through that first experience. And now things have come full circle, and people are seeing that there is actual, real, possible psychological, psychoanalytic uses for it under controlled circumstances with a therapist. I mean, I'm also into using it as an enjoyment and an artistic, and in doing my art. Like whenever Matthew and I play, I always microdose, or sometimes I go beyond microdosing. At my birthday party, I was way out there.
Yeah, man.
But back then, just as we had figured out, well, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with marijuana, so we thought, okay, we'll try the LSD, and then we found out there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it either. However, and also we were beginning to become very anti-alcohol, whereas today it seems that the young people are very much into alcohol, marijuana, and ecstasy more than they are into psychedelics. Somehow, because the ecstasy, because it's more of a speed that allows you to go to a rave and dance for 10 hours, and then you get lovey-dovey and you just want to fuck anybody 2 inches away from you. But you may not even give a shit about them. So the whole thing is kind of an empty experience. And it probably is better used as a therapeutic device with a therapist, because it does open up, it does remove that layer of ego that we all have constructed as we grow up from our societal input.
Yeah.
But as a party drug, I find it very inferior to LSD or mushrooms or mescaline. Very inferior. Because it's really more of a speed than it is a psychedelic. A psychedelic has that feeling of energy, but it also has that feeling of wonderment and enlightenment and well-being. And I think the ecstasy and the alcohol go together better. And then that kind of clouds, like the Burning Man. If you go to Burning Man, I think there's more ecstasy at Burning Man than psychedelics. And if you ever go to Burning Man as a couple, you will not come back as a couple. So don't go there as a couple.
I've heard that.
In fact, don't go to Burning Man.
Don't go at all. Shit. You got like deserts. But you know,
I've never been there, but every story I've heard makes me go, I'm never going to Burning Man.
Oh yeah, man. Well, you're not missing anything you haven't seen.
I know. Mountain Girl has been there, and
oh, she loves it. She'd go every year.
Yeah, well, she probably just hangs with her crowd. But I've known 3 major couples who were major couples.
Oh.
And when they came back, boom, it was over.
Oh, jeez. Well, that reminds me of the sexuality of the time. I mean, is it true, the things you hear about the different experimental forms of that men and women are trying to relate to each other in through the psychedelic experience? I mean, just how did the psychedelics color sexuality at that time?
Well, I think if you figured out how to do it at the right moment in the high, it could be
That's where
very,
it's at.
very enlightening. The sexuality was very, very loose at that time. Let me just say that I went to a number of parties where I had an involvement.
Don't worry, this
with
is the
someone
R-rated
that
podcast.
I barely knew, but had a good feeling for. And so my wife and I had an open relationship, but when she said it was closed, it was closed. Boom. When it was open, it was open.
That's the only way it would work, man.
Yeah, she was the only one that could open and close the door. I could.
Gatekeeper.
I wasn't
The
allowed to
penis.
open and close the door.
That's right.
We were married.
You had to get through her to get to you.
We were together for 49 years.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it says something to the staying power of psychedelics and free love, I suppose.
Wait, let me. Hold on.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Huh?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's just incredible incredible. It sounds like you guys were just like incredible like artists and stuff. How did you guys go from like a clothing gallery and gear to an art gallery?
Well, when we had our first gallery, which was a folk art gallery from 62 to 68, it was on the Visadero Street up by Pacific Heights. My wife had, when she was in LA City College, she was studying jewelry making. She had a small little gallery on Melrose Avenue before it took off back in like 56. And she sold jewelry, and several artists used to sell their art there. And then when we came back from Harvard, and I was teaching at the College of Jewish Studies, and she was pushing a baby carriage at the park, she goes, "Hey, I'm getting sick of this shit." So we opened up our first gallery, and we had a space in the back of the gallery where we had a crib, and she could change the baby.
Okay.
So we had several very famous artists. She knew Sister Mary Corita, who was this Catholic nun from Immaculate Heart College in L.A., who later left the order, who was used to do these silk screens very much like a Kenneth Patchen thing, where she had poetry and art on the prints that she did. We used to represent her and sell her prints. And then we sold, we had different textile artists, Lillian Elliott and Helen Durbin. We used to sell their art, and we had ceramicists, Michael Frimkis, and let's see, Ron Nagel, who's from the Art Institute. He was in the band The Mystery Trend, and now he's the head of the San Francisco Tape Music Center over at Mills College. We used to sell his ceramics, and my wife would design stuff and have different artists make for her. And then so when we opened In Gear, it wasn't just clothing, it was clothing that she either designed or allowed the girls to design on their own. And she was always buying and collecting art. And she was a good artist herself. She had a fantastic eye. She just saw right through. She saw right through people, and she saw right through to the gold.
Oh man,
yeah,
you were blessed. You were blessed for her. She sounds like a really exceptional woman.
Yeah.
What role did psychedelics play in your relationship? I mean, did they play an active role in your as you grew through the years, or how did they help you?
We used to do them together. We sometimes, when the band played up in my attic, the amplified home, we would all take acid, or a lot of times on New Year's we would take acid and then play at midnight. We would often take acid and have sex, and
did you feel like it served your intimacy, just your emotional intimacy, and help you to,
It did. For a while there, someone had turned her on to ecstasy, and then one night we were sitting around and she had taken some and I had, and she started getting kind of wanting to be intimate, and I'm going, well, wait a minute. You're just acting from the drug. You're not acting because the other day she wasn't anywhere near where she was that night on the drugs. So I'm going, wait a minute. This is coming from the ecstasy, and doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I may have been stupid or not. I don't know.
She would have fucked your brains out for sure, man.
I acted like Mr. Big and said, I don't want to. But, right. Sometimes you can be stupid stupidity is one of the features that man is stuck with, okay?
Hard, yeah.
I heard you mention you had a place up in Mendocino, and I know you were talking about all the people on like the Haight. Some of them started moving out. Like I was thinking about like Morningstar Ranch, and Black Bear and things like that. Did you see like a lot of the people kind of do both, like kind of have a little bit in the country and then a little bit in the city, or was everything?
Well, no. Most people moved out to the country, but when we in '74 we finally had everything packed up here at the house, and we rented the house out. So we took the girls were like 12 and 6 at that time, so we were going to school them up there. So for 2 years we baked and cooked and gathered. We had pear trees and apple trees and did the whole thing, and the snow and the burned out furnace and the frozen water pump, and had to go down to the creek to get the water and boil it and all of that shit. But basically we got very bored with the monk style of life, and so we were glad we still had the San Francisco abode, and we had a garden apartment, so we were able to leave a house rented, and we were then going back and forth between the garden apartment and the ranch, and then we fully moved back to the city. We just got too bored up in the country. I mean, we both are city people. Sometimes I could go up to the ranch and in 5 minutes I was ready to leave, because all I needed to do was kiss the 500-year-old tree, and it's time to go. I'm I discharged all the bullshit, and I'm ready to come back and get some more.
Right on.
Oh my God.
Well,
hey, you're going to edit this shit, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, no, we're actually live. I didn't tell you we were live.
Oh, we're live?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Hello, everybody. 500,000 people. Hey. We go around for Tsvi Deer, everybody.
Okay. All right. Ask me some serious questions. No.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't think there's such thing around here, but we'll do our best. So, okay. This episode, we were discussing, Laura and I were talking about the way that we've seen the drug world change over the course of our lives, and really from the early 1990s until now. What is your perception? I mean, you have a much longer arc in which you've observed and to different degrees participated. How would you describe the evolution?
Well, I think
how do you feel about where we are today?
Well, I think it's quite amazing that there are so many university medical schools. Harvard, Johns Hopkins, University of California now have actual psychedelic programs, a whole building devoted to researching the use of psychedelics as a therapeutic device. This is
That's
amazing.
right, man. Did you ever imagine that? Did you ever imagine
I never
that?
know. I mean,
No.
all the doctors were going, this is wrong. This is wrong. I mean, 2 years ago, I went to see one of my, I can't get too personal.
No.
One of my practitioners had been to a MAPS meeting, and when I saw him for my medical situation, he goes, "Can you get me some ecstasy?" I'm going, I can get you some good acid, but I don't have any Can you get me some ecstasy? So I managed to secure some for him, and I was just amazed that this guy he was a professor at a medical school, and he's asking me to help him.
To turn him on, man. Look at that.
And so that was a few years ago, but I think now all of these universities are just moving ahead very fast, and it's just amazing. And when I spent 30 years on cocaine, on and off for 30 years. And every time I took a break and did an acid trip, I going, holy shit, what am I wasting my time with this Nazi drug where I'm getting high for 2 minutes when I can take a drug and be high for a whole day?
Yeah, baby.
And experience some real insight. And then you go back to the stupid drug, because the stupid drug has a interesting way of making itself appear to you to be interesting when it's stupid. And it's not interesting, it's stupid.
You heard it here. You heard it here, people. Yeah. Would you credit psychedelics with helping you get off cocaine?
It always gave me the insight that I could get off. And there's 3 ways that I used to get off of being addicted. One was run out of drugs, and there was none around. The second was run out of money. And the third was to do a taper, which I never bothered to do. Because a taper was the correct way to do it. All the others caused problems. And thankfully, I haven't been involved with any stupid drugs for the last 25 years. 30 years. 30 years on and 30 years off. How's that?
Fantastic. Congratulations, man. Eleanor?
Yeah, this is just amazing. It's like I'm really thinking so much about, how different San Francisco is now today than it used to be. What are some of the things that you've noticed change the most? Like, how do you think about San Francisco now? Like,
well, like I tell people who, here, all right. People come and they go, well, there's no more hippies or anything. I say, if you look around and you look carefully, you will find that there are people around here that still carry on the spirit. And, I'm 84, and some of the musicians I play with are 44. And how did that happen? They found me because they moved to the neighborhood. And so they looked around and they found some old fucking hippie who had some ideals. So there is still things happening, but of course there's also the big tech development, all the Facebook. Zuckerberg lives just over the hill.
Yeah, I noticed how the art and culture and music that used to be so abundant and free, it feels like the artists, they're not necessarily rich enough to always afford everything. Have you noticed a lot of them have had to move over to Oakland, and now all of a sudden Oakland is more expensive than San Francisco. But
there's still a lot going on in the city. You can't go by the media reports. Everybody moving out of San Francisco. The rich are here and that. It's a mix. And it's different, and it's hard to explain.
Okay.
Here's an interesting note. When we were going to open In Gear in 1966, before that I used to go hang out in North Beach on Grand Street at this gallery that Avram Rubinstein. He had been a professor of mathematics, and then he quit Berkeley and became a painter, and he had a storefront gallery, and I used to hang out with him. And one night this jazz writer from the Chronicle, famous guy Grover Sales, he was there, and a couple other people, and said, "Hey guys, my wife and I are gonna open up a store on Haight Street." And they go, "Haight Street? Haight Ashbury? That ain't ever gonna last." Well, look at North Beach. There are no beatniks or beats or anything in there anymore. And and as bad as Haight Street became, there's this thing that draws people. That's why I call it the magical, mystical vortex. And don't ask me to explain it, because I don't have an explanation. But it's been since 64, it's been drawing people to it, and it hasn't stopped. So I don't know how to explain that. And
okay,
yeah.
I got one for you.
Go ahead.
So now we're having this new burgeoning wave of a second psychedelic renaissance. We are really kind of at just the doorstep of it. And what do you want the people of this next wave, the new generation that are just now turning on, and the people who will be moving this forward into mainstream, integrating it into businesses? What, if you could impart something to them that you felt essential to the ethics of it, what would it be? Do you have?
Well, I think someone has to write a manual that explains when and how to use these psychedelics, when it's appropriate to use them, when it's appropriate to microdose. I mean, because you can't just make them legal and then just let anybody get whatever they want, and you have people falling down, feeling bad or feeling good and then feeling bad. I mean, there has to be a manual of how to navigate this, because it took all of us. I mean, without Leary's Book of the Dead and explanations from him, it wouldn't have been that easy for people to start taking psychedelics. And
what's the formula for that? What's the basic formula?
Well, I don't know. I'm not.
I mean, setting. Did you emphasize integration? We've been talking a lot about that between us.
Well, setting, and dosage.
Well, we got cut off there, but hey, what did you think about that? What were some of the things you gathered?
Well, I kind of took so much away from it, and as you just heard from the interview, it's just what a rich, incredibly insane and brilliant and vibrant person, right? Like, it's hard to even believe.
People.
Yes, he's just like insane. And like some of my stories about how I arrived in the 1990s into San Francisco for the first time, and how surprised I was by that. And it's like that generation of people made so many things in their community to help people, right?
That was really striking to me. Like that, like how he was talking about that one point. He was like, him and his friend were like, "Hey, all these kids are just don't have a place to go after dark. Let's fix that."
Yeah,
right? Like that kind of just natural
so
social
much.
responsibility, that they would just not just go back to their own little apartment and go, oh, too bad for them, but like, let's figure out a scene for these kids so everyone can hang out.
And
God,
how
it's so, oh,
organically it developed, right?
yeah,
Now all these things you have to get permits and go through this and that and start a nonprofit, and there's just so much to things, right? But they just had that kind of psychedelic mindset of just make it happen, right? And to
and
me,
that
that's
just
like a
natural,
huge takeaway.
that natural sense of responsibility for each other,
And the possibility of actually making it actionable.
Right, right. And like in that situation, what they do, I think they went and talked to some hip pastor who was like, oh, you guys could use my chapel or whatever. And then they hooked it up and it became a thing for a while. Like that, like how he was talking about that one point, he was like, him and his friend were like, hey, all these kids don't have a place to go after dark. Let's fix that.
Yeah,
right? Like that kind of just natural
so
social
much.
responsibility that they would just not just go back to their own little apartment and go, oh, too bad for them, but like, let's figure out a scene for these kids so everyone can hang out. I know for me, it's something that I really took note of was how there was this idea that heroin and harder drugs kind of came in and soiled, the innocence of this kind of psychedelic bucolic society, but that really, he said that wasn't the case. He said that it was really always there, but it was kind of more rock star drug. Only they could afford it, but apparently speed was present the whole time, and even got less so when acid came in because people naturally kind of straightened up in a different way when they were turning on. Yeah. What did you think? What stood out to you?
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah. And then even like all the free movement stuff, like all the free store, the free medical care.
Yeah, and some of those things even exist, like, not only when I was there in the 90s, but they're even in existence today, right?
Yeah, the Haight Ashbury, the clinic is still there.
Yeah, right? And all of those kind of things. And if I were to have like a takeaway or something, it's that it's really possible to make change, right? It's really possible to actually not just have an idea or have some lofty feelings that you can make a difference in your community or make a difference in people's lives. But hey, don't just sit around and think about it or talk about it. You can actually just get in there and just start doing it. Yeah. And I feel like that generation really did that in a way that no other generation before had done it just like that. I mean, it was completely unique to that Haight Ashbury. Is I so much of that happening at like one time, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like it seemed like this congruent, like this this conflux of these different variables, like, you know what I mean, the time and the place, the geography, the mentality, that particular level of freedom, and being able to like get a flatbed truck and find someone's apartment who would plug your cord in and play a concert in an afternoon to whoever showed up.
For free.
For free.
Right.
I mean, how special is that? I interviewed a little clip of Phil Lesh from some years ago. We were having a brunch for charity, and he was talking about how they got started playing free in the park and how that was one of his favorite things, but how it could never happen. It could never happen these days because of just the logistics of insurance and all the different hassles. So, some of that stuff was really, I think, unique to the state of our country and the state of the laws. I mean, acid wasn't even illegal for probably the best part of the 60s, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to just try to think about how much the city has changed since that time. History is really deep and rich, but there is no denying that the 60s and Haight Ashbury in that time is forever kind of just embedded in the story of San Francisco, right?
And America, in America, it is just such a pinnacle chapter of what is American culture, America's unique cultural imprint on the world. And I'm quite proud of it as a Californian. It's a really, really rich history.
Yeah, so when you see somebody who's like really witnessed that entire life cycle, right? It's really, and then still sees all the beauty and art and is still making the music and the art, that's just beyond, it's
Yeah,
just
that
beyond,
cat's a true brew, man.
right? That's like
Ah.
as great as it gets.
Oh
And
yeah.
it completely inspires me to just know that like you just can't ever stop, right?
Stay the course.
Stay the course.
That's right. Ride or die, man.
Forever.
Yeah, lifers.
And yeah, and I feel like one of the things that, can be really hard when, you've got like addiction or you're struggling with a lot of these things in the city is really hard because it's one
Yeah,
thing if you live in like a rural isolated community or
that's
you're in
right.
Alabama or wherever you
Yeah.
are. I mean, the drugs are there, you'll find them,
So,
but a city is insane because
yeah,
it really literally can be everywhere.
that's right. Yeah, I had to actually, I never let it go so far as to ruin my relationship with San Francisco because it's so special to me. But for a time, I had to really lose some numbers and just stay out of the city because there was just too many, dark temptations with hard drugs there. That was just so easy to come by. And, I couldn't actually be down there just the way I work and the people I knew. I couldn't be down there and not be around it for a time. So I did
Yeah.
change that up though. And I'm really happy because now I can be a part of that city still and not have to deal with those kind of temptations.
Yeah, well, like Haight Ashbury isn't even the center of that, right? So the
Oh, it was just
Tenderloin,
it was just a phone
right?
call
The
away in the Haight
Tenderloin
Ashbury.
is so crazy.
Oh
So
man,
my partner lived
I've only walked
on the corner of
through
Turk
briskly.
and Taylor, right? Like
Why is that
111 Taylor. After coming out of incarceration, he was in the halfway house stuck in Turk and Taylor. So we'd always have to like go down there. And I'm telling you, I went down to the Tenderloin. Dude, it's ripe. It's crazy. It's
open
gotten
air drug
so
market, right?
yeah, it's gotten so out of control. Like it literally is it's unimaginable. And one of the things that they're really working on in San Francisco is trying to maybe have some safe places for like kind of just a harm reduction.
Yeah, like a place people can go use drugs with like medical staff nearby and
Yeah.
right and get cleaned up and get clean needles
and find some ways to really deal with it because it's a really human.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, and and the answers to that are really challenging in a city. I mean, how many square miles is San Francisco? Like 800, 700?
I think it's 7 square miles.
Yeah, and then it's a city of like maybe 800,000 people or something. Is that about?
I'm not sure. Maybe
we'll have
more.
to fact check this stuff.
Yeah, definitely fact check.
Right?
Don't hold us to the numbers,
yeah,
people.
don't hold us. But
although I'm pretty sure about the 7 miles.
yeah, and in that, you're gonna have so much disparity and so much craziness. And one of the things that I think the Haight Ashbury has done and so well is to maintain its character and maintain its inclusiveness and welcomeness despite all the changes that go around.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it hasn't been overtaken by the homeless,
Yeah, so I think like, one of the things about Haight Ashbury is it had one of the first like free clinics, right?
Yeah, right. That was the Diggers kind of had a hand in that, right?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, I think that's amazing, and it was born in the time when that whole summer of love, right?
Yeah.
And I think it transformed the first ideas of at least like, as far as I know, drug addiction treatment. Right. And how that happened. And
bad trip outreach.
Yeah, exactly. And I think UCSF doctor started it, which is like pretty amazing that is still in existence today.
That's right. Yep. And that's one of the key architects that we spoke with tonight. And yeah, I got a lot of respect for the Diggers. I mean, I ended up living in a commune.
Yes, you
up
did.
in Siskiyou.
That's
yeah,
so
that
amazing.
was Digger land, man. That they bought it. It was up in Siskiyou County, Black Bear Ranch. It's still there to this day. I mean, and you can fucking go there. And it was basically they bought it in a way where on the land deed, there's no one owner. It's like literally forever will be for the people, by the people. And if you can go there, and if you're cool to everybody, and there's an empty cabin, which there are many because it's an old mining town, you can just say, oh, I like that cabin, I'm going to move in, and just move in. That's what I did for like a year.
Yes.
Not quite even a full year. Yeah.
Yes, and it's so amazing. It's so beautiful there, and it's so polar opposite of being downtown in the city, right?
Yes, yes. It's very remote, very remote. It is
And
way the fuck out there on a dirt road, many, many, miles down a dirt road. But it has that Diggers ethos. It's really the main house. I'll never forget it. It was like there's one big main house that everyone kind of gathers in for meals. There's a big kitchen there, and there's a room upstairs that was like clothes. It was just like clothes. So you just help yourself. There's boxes and boxes of clothes, decades of clothes. And then there was another room that was all a library, like books and instruments. And it was the same kind of trip, like leave one, take one, you know. Didn't cost any money. We would pass a hat around and you could pitch in what you could. But the only rule, it was actually a little too loose, if you ask me. I think in the end, that's like not really, I think it was missing a certain something that kind of makes sure shit got done. Cause I mean, we just got high a lot and just hung around naked and just everyone was fucking, and it was just like very free, you know. And the only rule was don't sit naked on the countertops.
yeah, that's a good rule to have.
I mean, I gotta say it's a good rule. But it was the only rule, though. That when you couldn't grow grass there, and those are literally the only two rules. And because of that, like a lot didn't get done, but it had so much potential. I mean, there was big gardens that could have been, that were overgrown, and
Yeah, so gorgeous,
goat
right?
pens, and yeah, you've been out there, right, Laura?
Yeah, and everything's just
Have you
like,
just visited,
built over time and stuff, right? So like
very hand built, very funky, cool.
Yeah, taking like it was an old gold
murals,
mining, right?
Old gold mining town.
Yeah. And then it gets turned into so it's really crazy because it was like actually a town, and then it got turned into all the different buildings.
There's probably like a dozen different like cabins,
structures,
and then barns, and then like the main house, and yeah.
And you can see everyone's like creativity, right? Because there's like, oh, let's build like kind of a place for like a sweat. Let's build a place for everything, and so it's just got its like handprint of everybody's life, all around it. But what it really comes down to is that those counterculture roots and ethos born out of that Haight Ashbury time era.
Yeah, very much so. And that was the thing, is people would turn on in the city, turn on with psychedelics and discover these simpler values for how they wanted to model their life, close to nature and away from materialism and money and of group living. And I got to say, though, I've seen the same. There's a few examples of this in Northern California that I've seen up close. And I know you have too, Laura. I think of the hog farm.
Yeah.
And I think of Black Bear Ranch. And I will say the hog farm, out of all of them, I think is probably the most impressive in its cohesion all these years later. And there's still original members that live there and haven't left. And they all have their homes and they've raised families. Now they have grandchildren. And I think is more the exception. And I know I've studied different intentional communities in America since the 60s, what kind of the trajectory they all followed. And there's a common arc that I think it really speaks to human nature and something to be noticed and embraced. And that was, they were experimenting with sharing everything in the 60s and really recognizing each of us as equal, brothers and sisters before one cosmic creator, and that every man every woman was every woman, and every what I mean. And so there was like this ethos of free love, which was where every woman is the goddess, and every man is God, and experimenting with letting go of all those different kind of natural forms that humans tend to relate in and build nuclear families in. And what I noticed at Black Bear especially is there was a time when everyone was really experimenting with that, and I was too at the time. But then what happens is as time goes on, people tend to want to pair up, and they have their own children, and then become these family units that then would move away from the community, so they weren't sharing everything. So they had some privacy for their family, but would live close to each other, so that like all the old school Black Bear folks, they all live around Black Bear, but they have
Yeah.
their own properties.
And their
And
kids
then they come together and
hang
have
out.
potlucks, but they're not
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like all sleeping in the same room and everybody's eating it. Like it was this balance of privacy and also shared. And I think that was a really good thing to pay attention to, because I know even just after a year was coming up to against the natural obstacles humans come up against if you're sharing your partners and you're sharing, it's just, I don't know. It's different for everybody. And I understand it. I just don't think humans are evolutionary. Like we're not caught up yet to really live that. It's a very psychedelic vision to do that. And I get it. It's like a place of total unity. But I think humans still have a lot to clean up in their own karma and their own emotions. And, and some of that stuff you don't even need to try to shake. It's okay to be really, into your partner and don't want to share her or him. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You don't have to try to dose that impulse out of you. You know what I mean? So
I definitely think that the free love ethos of like the early Haight and all of these people, definitely came up against some roadblocks,
that just seemed intrinsic to the human, right? Yeah,
exactly.
And people try to shake it, but jealousy catches up and diseases and all that stuff. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it can be even challenging. I was cracking up in the interview because Stevie was talking about, I hugged a tree and I had to get right back to the city, right?
Right.
I think, it's like...
He was a city cat.
Yeah. And I was just thinking like that has its own whole entire like social structure just of like that's human interaction on a level that like you don't necessarily get in a rural isolated community, right?
I see why he loved it. Yeah, the access to culture, there's electricity there.
And people, and like it's kinetic and you're just always interacting with people like constantly, right? I mean, you can stay in your house and like have moments of like privacy and isolation, but you're just like out and about and there's a lot of people and a lot of different kinds of people. It's like sometimes the city is so electric.
Yeah, it is so electric.
Yeah.
So I always loved living in Humboldt because it's been such a perfect balance for me. Like, because I don't want to live in that. I really want the peace and this expansiveness of nature, really raw form around me. But, about every week or two, I just start feeling like I need a little dose of some real city electricity. And it's just 5 hours, boom, you're down there in the middle of it until it usually lasts about 2 or 3 days, and then I'd be really ready to get back to the trees.
Well, yeah, the nights are so different, right? Like the nights in the country are like stars and like all of this kind of stuff. But the nights in the city, there's stars out, but everything, there's a whole different element that comes to life, It's almost like there's like, and it's not just like the cliche of nightlife. Like there's literally like a whole entire world that happens of people that just like work at night, for the city and like do things and just
Wait, I just while you're saying that, I'm just flashing on like countless amount of great moments we've had at shows down there.
Yeah.
I mean, like you guys, I mean, really, like, Laura and I and like our whole crew and stuff. It's so many wonderful, just fucking hilarious, like it's just stoned antics, like coming out of like the Bill Graham Civic or something like 2 a.m, to the hotel across the street. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Some really great shit.
You don't know what's gonna happen. Or who you're gonna run into. And I think that's kind of like the magic of like a city environment is you definitely cannot predict like the next thing that's gonna happen.
It was very friendly to taking drugs. I
thought.
I mean, you just walk around that place just fucking lit to lit to the gills, and you just gotta blend right in with all this absurdity,
That's kind of why Haight Ashbury is amazing, because it's almost like the beginning of like a freak show in a way, like a circus, like, theatrics. Like not only were there like literal theatrical groups like the San Francisco Mime Troupe or something, but people literally used to get in buses, tour buses, and pay to drive by and like hippie watch.
That's right.
Like, just how insane is that, right? Like, it was
And then
almost like
there'd be a head holding a mirror, like running alongside the bus, you know?
yeah,
Really, just good shit, creative shit like that.
yeah, exactly.
And they
So
still have events, don't they, Laura? I mean, I think now that hopefully, the pandemic is fading away, and they're like the
cross our fingers.
Yes, I'm feeling good about today anyway. The Haight Street Fair is every summer, which is a great multi-day open street fair that's been going on since I think the '70s. And then there's Harley Strictly Bluegrass is another
Oh, that's the greatest.
big free bluegrass multi-day. I mean, just amazing lineups usually and free, right in the park there.
Yeah,
Outside Lands is another one.
Oh,
I think that one you have to buy a ticket for, but
but it's so fun.
That's right in that neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like really like so many events and stuff taking place in the park, and the whole thing about Haight Ashbury is the street literally goes right to the very end where the park is.
Yeah, it sure
and
does.
so
And then the Panhandle, and then you have this little slender narrow band of really nice part of the park of just big old oak trees and stuff runs alongside Haight Street, right? And then it ends at the park. So it's just bucolic.
Yeah.
But of course, we still have Alembic down the road, and then there's Amoeba Records too.
Oh my gosh, we have to talk about the Amoeba Records.
Let's hear
like
it.
you cannot
Come on.
even be like a kid in our generation, in our era, and not have spent all of the money that you got from slinging those hates
Down
at Amoeba Records.
Oh man, I
So-
just spent an afternoon at Amoeba just being there is just the best.
Oh man, that they've got so many of our
Tell us
so
about
much of our
Amoeba,
money.
Laura.
That's
Yeah.
like the greatest, right? Like you literally had like that's like home away from home.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just world-class record store, right, Laura?
Oh well, and just the most rare finds, right? That's the most fun.
And
Is
the
feeling
funkiest
like you.
dudes who work there and just are so knowledgeable about everything. It's great street performers too, still to this day. So, but hey, yeah, I really, hey, if y'all are from America, or even if you are, gotta see it in your lifetime. Go on by and just bring some flowers in your hair and smile to the people you see. Pick up your garbage and just carry a smile in your heart, and you'll fit right in.
Yeah, exactly.
You ever find yourself in a precarious drug-related situation? Facing questions that you know not the answers to? You ever think to yourself, I have nowhere to turn for such answers? Strange questions like, are these drugs illegal in this country? Or help with simple math equations like, now did that scale say micrograms? Did that last acid trip leave you facing big questions about your place in the physical universe? Or wondering if your pet hamster really could see the color of your thoughts? Or the beloved classic, am I too high, man? Am I ever gonna calm down? 1-833, I am too high. That's right. Call now for your opportunity to have your questions read on the air by our team of completely unprofessional, not trained, and likely very stoned drug experts. 1-833, I am too high. Until then, put on some good music, relax, and breathe.
Yo, hippie, what you got in there? Fuck you, smoking, we're clean.
Oh yeah. So don't forget, everybody, we got that special line just for you. You can reach out and touch us and leave us your questions, your drug questions, whatever that means to you, and we'll get to it next episode.
Unavailable, take the call. Highness doesn't wait for people to, get around to answering the telephone. This is Fritzy McGee from Maryland or Maine or Massachusetts. I don't remember. I need help.
Oh, well. Oh,
I think
Fritzy.
I think he gave us some good feedback there.
I remember Fritz. You remember Fritzy on tour? I remember Fritzy on tour.
Yeah,
I bought some dynamite acid from Fritzy.
well, he doesn't remember where he's from, so that might be the challenge.
I have to agree with you, Fritzy. Highness does not wait for anything, really. It kind of occurs when it does, doesn't it? You can chase it. You can try to will it, but you know, it only happens when it chooses you, and sometimes it can be real elusive, but doesn't mean you should stop trying. But I do recommend you remember which state you came from. Although not for these purposes, but you know, driver's license, Laura.
Yeah, the state of mind. I think that's where I'm from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, far out.
Doesn't matter what state you're at as long as you're in a good state of mind.
In a Fritzy state of mind. So we feel you, Fritzy, and we love you for calling and call back again. And anyone else, we look forward to hearing from you. And so we will be back in 2 weeks. Laura, anything else to say?
I think that's
I think we covered it.
Yeah, I think we
covered it. But we're really excited for the next episode. We got Sunshine Kesey coming at you from Eugene, Oregon. And I think we're gonna talk about, I don't know, maybe families and psychedelics and drugs, and I think we're still figuring out our discussion, Laura. But
no, that's awesome. I love that.
Probably some Oregon Grateful Dead history. But Sunshine was so generous and gave us a full hour. Just some really really beautiful insights. So I'm really excited to share with you guys. And then we got her mom, Mountain Girl, the following episode. So we're dishing out the kind, y'all. So come on back in 2 weeks. We changed our minds all the time.
That's so awesome. I love everything about that.
All right. Yay.
Yay.
That was sweet. So much fun.
All right.
This is the thing, dude. This is real.
Oh my gosh. Yes,
you have a real as fuck podcast on the internet. You know that?
Wow.
We did it.
I love that you said that. That just sounds so exciting.
Yeah.
Put your hand on my head. Underwater, you're breathing steady. You're pushing me far below. I know it's hard to tread and breathe on your own. And I love you so, I hope you know the pain you feel is not your home.